Hi, I'm Lisa. I've been teaching English as a second language for over 10 years. Today, I would like to talk to you about advancing the conversation. So many of you would say that you're very shy, you're not very good at conversation, you're not a good conversationalist. Thinking about myself as a young girl, if you ask any of my friends, they probably would say I wasn't a good conversationalist either. Why? I was pretty shy, but I listened a lot. And I learned to study conversation. I learned to know how to advance the conversation. So you can still be shy and be a good conversationalist. So the first thing that you have to work on is what we call speech production. And this could be very difficult if you do feel very shy. What is speech production? Speech production is how much you speak, how much you talk. So if you think about somebody that you had a great conversation with, why was it really great? One of the reasons could be they talk a lot and it made your job just a little bit easier because the words came naturally. They spoke a lot. You had a lot to work with. And so it was easier to talk to them. With a few simple adjustments, you too can be a better conversationalist. One thing you have to think about is questions. You've heard me say this before if you've watched my previous videos. Questions, because that's what helps us give a back and forth. You've heard me compare it to the game of tennis. You hit the ball, means you say something, the person hits the ball back, they say something, it's a back and forth. But think about the type of questions that work well. You should be asking viewpoint questions. So viewpoint questions is when you ask somebody what they think. So often, instead of just telling someone what you think, if you ask a viewpoint question, what do you think about? And they are going to give you more than just a yes or no. So a yes or no question is not a viewpoint question. Put very simply, if I ask you, did you have dinner today? It's either yes or no, it's not maybe. But if I change that question and say, what did you have for dinner today? You have to say more than yes or no. Oh, Lisa, I had lasagna. I had rice and beans. I had a cheeseburger. I had peanut butter and jelly. That gives me more to work with instead of yes or no, because I can advance the conversation. So if you said, for example, I had lasagna, I would say, oh, great. I love lasagna. Do you have a great recipe you could share with me? I have something to work with. So think about the type of question that you're asking because it will invite the listener to say more. The other thing I want to talk to you about is your answer. So if you are asked a question, how do you answer? How do you answer? Do you answer enough? Thinking out about that idea of speech production. So if I asked you, perhaps you moved to New York, right, from your native country, and I said, how do you like living here? Think about what you would say to me if I asked you, how do you like living here? How do you like New York? How would you answer? Would you just say, oh, it's good, it's great? That's really not enough to advance a conversation. You have to give the listener more. You might say something like, it's great, it's wonderful. I spent my first winter here in New York. This is the first time I've experienced snow. In my native country, we don't have snow. So you picked up on a detail in your experience in living in New York, and then the listener can respond to that. Oh, wow, really? Your first time experiencing snow? And the conversation could move forward. If you just say, oh, New York is great. Okay, that's truthful, and maybe it is great. Maybe you had a nice experience so far living there, but it's really not enough. And I say it's not enough because now the person you're speaking to has to ask another follow-up question because they didn't get enough. So they might ask, oh, so where in New York do you live? When exactly did you get here? And if you keep giving these short answers, it causes the person to continue to ask follow-up questions. And eventually they could get tired. Why? Because they're the only ones driving the conversation. Let's talk about what exactly is driving the conversation, and you need to get better at driving a conversation to be a good conversationalist. Driving the conversation is very important. Essentially, it means take control. Control the conversation. You cannot leave the control up to the other person. One of those things that you need to control is the speed of the conversation. So if you're an English language learner, perhaps you're not at an advanced level yet, perhaps you're just intermediate, that's great. Sometimes a native can speak too fast. Although I feel English is a language to be spoken more slowly, you do not need to speak quickly to show that you're advanced. I naturally speak a little bit slower, and that's fine. People tell me they can understand me, so I'm happy that I have a comfortable listening pace. Often the other person will match your pace. So if somebody speaks really quickly, sometimes we have a tendency to want to speak quickly too, to match their pace. If somebody speaks slower, sometimes we tend to slow down to match their pace. So if the person is not matching your pace, if you find they're not getting the hint that you need them to speak slower, then you need to directly ask them, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. You said that too quickly. Or can you slow down, please? Remind them that you're an English language learner if necessary. But you have to also do your part in the conversation, taking control of the speed. The next thing that you have to control, of course, is participating in the back and forth, asking questions. You have to make sure to wait for the answer patiently. So if you ask a question, it is your question. Take responsibility for the question you asked. Wait patiently for the answer, because the answer could guide you to let you know what is the next thing you need to say or the next question you need to ask. We have to be careful not to get so fearful or so concerned about the vocabulary that you asked a question, you don't wait for the answer, your mind is already thinking about the next thing you're going to say, but the person's answer is going to guide the conversation. So you have to listen for it, because sometimes we ask a question and we think, oh, I know what they're going to say. I know what they're going to answer. Going back to my question, what if you moved to New York and somebody asked you, big smile, hey, so how do you like living in New York? They might expect you to say, you love it. It's a city that never sleeps after all, right? But what if you had a horrible experience? Maybe something happened to you. Maybe you got sick. Maybe you suddenly lost your job as you arrived. Who knows? That is going to change that conversation. So the person has to drive in a different direction. So do you understand what I mean about really controlling the conversation? The speed, listening to the answers to the questions that you asked. Also be ready to answer fully a question. Give details, give the listener something to work with. The other thing that you can prepare to be a better conversationalist is be ready to talk about common topics. You shouldn't be struggling with talking about things such as your job. You should be able to describe what you do. You should know the English equivalent to what you do. You shouldn't be stumbling over words. That should be pretty smooth. Can you describe what you do? If you're studying, can you describe what you're majoring in? Can you talk very fluently about your native country, where you're from, the city name in English, perhaps the name of the country in English? All of those things you should be ready to talk about. Your family. Do you have a big family, a small family? Are you married? Are you single? Do you want to be married? Those things are also culturally acceptable in the American culture that I'm talking about. Be ready to answer those things on the first meeting. So if you think about those few tips that I've given you, it will help you to advance the conversation. That's always the goal. So if you find yourself being cut short or your conversation's ending, make those adjustments, right? How you ask questions, the type of questions, how you answer. Are you controlling the speed? Are you driving the conversation? Are you participating in the back and forth? Are you ready to talk about the topics that are expected of you to be comfortable speaking about? And then you will start to make your way to being a better conversationalist. Just a final point. If there's someone that you want to talk more to, perhaps a neighbor or a coworker, and you just feel like, not so sure how I can go about talking to them. Well, of course, I had the tips previously mentioned, but you can prepare for somebody that you know you want to talk to and you know them. What do you know about them? So what do you know about them? Do they have kids, for example? Do they have pets? And what are their interests? What are their hobbies? Take the things that you know, and then you can initiate a conversation. Just as an example, if there's a neighbor that you feel like, I want to get to know them better, I want to talk more to them when I see them. So think about what you know. Do they love gardening? Then you should prepare some questions about gardening. Do they have a dog? Maybe they love their dog. Maybe you know something that happened in their life and you can ask a follow-up question. Perhaps their mom was sick. Ask, how is your mom doing? Or if they lost their job, maybe you can show some sympathy, prepare some words or things that you can say. So think about what you know about the person. Think about questions that you can ask to initiate the conversation and advance it, and you'll be surprised. It'll be a lot easier. So it just takes a little forethought. If you know the person, think about what you know about them, their interests, their hobbies, what concerns them. Prepare a couple questions in your mind before you initiate that conversation and see how that goes.